Baseball Tonight, the podcast.
This is the Baseball Tonight podcast for Wednesday, March 1st, 2017. I'm Buster Olney, and our esteemed producer is Josh Macri, who works in this podcast every single day. And Josh, did you watch the big event last night?
Sad? Are we doing
What do you mean sad?
Sad exclamation mark? That's how I'm gonna finish every tweet now, if that's what you're referencing.
Sad exclamation? No, I'm talking about Vanderbilt's game against Kentucky.
Yeah, like
they had
I
a 19-point lead in the first
sad.
half. The refs took over the game. Somebody had to reset the universe for the University of Kentucky. Whatever.
Sad.
Yeah, okay.
The failing Vanderbilt Commodores.
The good thing is the NCAA selection committee only takes into account the first 30 minutes of each game in making its decisions about who to put in the field. That's the good news, right?
Sad.
Okay, well, today we'll be talking with Tim Kurkjian about the bad news the Mets got about David Wright, and we'll hear from David Wright himself. We'll also hear from Andy McCullough of the LA Times, who tells us about how Clayton Kershaw might have changed since his back injury. Yankees shortstop Didi Gregorius goes rapid fire. But first, some news and notes. Joe Blanton, the veteran reliever, had a really good season with the Dodgers last year in 80 regular season innings. He signed with the Nationals for $1 million plus $3 million in deferred salary for the years ahead. I talked to an executive last night. He said, wow, that is a great signing for Washington, which has needed some bullpen depth. The exhibition season continues, and Greg Bird, who's coming back after missing all of 2016 with a shoulder injury, went deep a couple of times against the Red Sox.
Here's the pitch, and a swing and a high drive to right field. This is deep down by the pesky pole. It's carrying, and it is gone. A home run. A long home run pulled by Greg Bird. His first of the spring, and it's 2-0 Yankees just like that. Slim left-hander delivers, and the pitch is hit high to left center. It's up into the wind. Jackie back, looking up, and this ball is on the roof, a home run. So Bird goes deep for the second time. One to right, one to left, and the Yankees lead at 3-2.
Yeah, and so far the Yankees' young players doing well this spring. Joe Castiglione with that call, by the way, on both those home runs. Bryce Harper continues to do damage.
That ball's well hit. Left field, Applin back, and off the wall. Bob Henley waves Murphy home. Back-to-back doubles by Murphy and Harper. The Nats are on top 1-0.
Bob Carpenter with that call. And the Cubs continue to play great defense.
First and second with a run in, and it's Martin Maldonado. And he swings and hits a ground ball to Kawasaki, leaves his feet, glove to Baez, throwing the dirt, dug out by Dominguez at first. Oh, what a makeup by Kawasaki. A 6-4-3 double play to end the inning.
Len Casper with that call. And Madison Bumgarner is doing his thing against the Padres.
Spangenberg strikes out against Bumgarner. First strikeout of the day for Bumgarner. And they're 2 down in the first inning.
Don Arcilla with that call. And the details on David Wright. General Manager Sandy Alderson told reporters that Wright has been diagnosed with an impingement in his right shoulder, and he will not throw a baseball for a couple weeks. Wright, of course, is owed $67 million over the next 4 seasons. He had surgery last June to repair a herniated disc in his neck. His status for opening day remains questionable, but let's face it, at this point, the Mets have no expectation that he will be ready at the outset of the season. Terry Collins told reporters that Jose Reyes will take over at third base, and he indicated that David Wright is willing to try first base. Let's get to it.
Seamheads rejoice.
Noodle-us.
It's Timmy time.
Is this a great game or what?
With Tim Kurkjian on Baseball Tonight.
And Tim Kurkjian covers baseball for ESPN. He's on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. And Tim, it feels like that the news about David Wright is almost inevitable at this point. And I wrote a column last week about how I thought the Mets had done a really good job of preparing for the likelihood, the possibility that Wright would not be available to play this spring. And sure enough, we get news from Sandy Alderson on Tuesday that he's being shut down for a couple weeks. He hasn't even thrown a baseball really that much, Tim, to get ready for the year. And I think everyone's being polite because everyone loves David Wright so much. He's a great guy. There's no better citizen in baseball. But you do wonder if they're having conversations about what's next for him and about whether or not he's going to contribute, because the reality is, we sit here today, his greatest value to the Mets might be on the disabled list, where the Mets could recoup some of his salary and insurance money, because there's no indication that he would actually be able to help them on the field.
Yeah, it's discouraging, Buster. I talked to a bunch of Mets about this yesterday, and, he can throw a baseball like 60 feet so far, and I was told that ball isn't coming off his bat at all in any circumstance, and none of that is good news. I asked someone, not in authority, but I said, just give me a guess how many games David Wright will play this year, and he said, well, it could be 0, and that's just really discouraging when you hear that. But bottom line, Buster, is the injury that he has is a really serious one, and the thought of playing third base in the big leagues with those kind of restrictions on your body, that simply isn't going to happen. And you just can't hit in the big leagues with a neck and back injury like he has. But he is such a pro's pro on every level that I know he's spoken to the Mets about, look, you can't worry about my feelings here. We got to put the best team on the field. And if I can't play, then I can't play. And if I do play, and I'm not hitting, you got to hit me down in the order. And I know this for a fact, Buster. He's so proud of what he's done to this point that he wants to be a really good player again. And the thought of going out there and not being a good player, I think really, really upsets him, that he can't go out there unless he's really good. And at this point, I don't see a way he goes out there anytime soon and is a really good player again.
No, he would have to eventually perhaps transition to playing first base. Terry Collins mentioning to reporters that that's something that he could be open to, especially with everything going on with Lucas Duda. I would say that the big silver lining in all this, Tim, is that it's happened early in spring training. And so if you're the Mets, then you have time to give Jay Bruce reps at first base. And you potentially now have set up Michael Conforto, who looks tremendous this spring, in a place where you can say, look, right field is yours. Curtis Granderson's the center fielder. You're the right fielder. And you can tell Jose Reyes now, with a lot of assuredness, you are the third baseman until something perhaps changes with David Wright, but that's indefinite at this point.
Right, and when I talked to Terry Collins yesterday, this was the main point he made with all these injuries, is we have depth that we simply didn't have 2 years ago. They have Reyes to play third, and you're right. If Bruce can handle first base because Lucas Duda is hurt, and you can also play Wilmer Flores over there and move people around, and that can create a spot for Conforto, who, you're right, I saw him again yesterday swinging the bat really well, made a great play in the outfield. He needs to play if he's going to be in the big leagues, and if Bruce can play first, and that will solve a lot of situations. But the bottom line is at least the Mets have some options with injuries, and they're going to need them because I don't think those injuries are going to get better anytime soon.
What are the early returns about Jay Bruce as a first baseman?
Well, again, I always worry, Buster, about taking an outfielder and putting him in the infield. It's a completely different animal when you go in there. But he's a good athlete. He's been a good right fielder for most of his career. And I think if you look at it, he might say, well, this is my best chance to play every day or play a lot. And this is the best chance for our team is to get Conforto's bat in the lineup. So we'll see if he can handle first base. I checked yesterday, and I'm told he's gotten plenty of reps already, but we won't really know, obviously, till we see him more and more in spring training games and then in regular season games. But from what I was told yesterday, he's going to be okay over there.
Tim, a really interesting story coming out of the Red Sox camp. It was first dug out by Rob Bradford of WEEI.com. David Price's delivery is drawing scrutiny from Major League Baseball. And when I first saw the headline, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because mentioned in the column today that, this is a copycat sport, like all sports are, where if someone's doing something unique that's working, a lot of other players will use it. The best example over the last couple decades might be Mariano Rivera's use of the cut fastball. Suddenly you had a generation of guys using the cut fastball. And David Price has such an unusual delivery where he takes these baby steps to put himself in position to deliver the ball. And more now you watch games and other pitchers are doing it. Well, apparently what's happened, and David talked to Rob about this yesterday, I confirmed it this morning, is that Major League Baseball is having a hard time distinguishing in Price's delivery, the umpires are, I should say, when he's working from the set position with a runner at third base and when he's working from the windup. And so they want David Price to go to the umpires and basically say to them, look, I'm working from the set position or I'm working from the windup, because in their eyes, the subtlety is so different. And I bet you part of that is because we're seeing more and more guys like Drew Pomerantz use the David Price delivery, which I think is designed basically to reduce the amount of movement in the mechanics and make it easier for him to command the ball.
Right. Buster, I saw him throw on the side Sunday in Fort Myers, and I've seen him throw on the side in games many, many times. And every time I look at it, it confuses me. Like, when is this okay to do this? And is this a balk? And is he in the stretch here? Is he in the wind-up here? Is he allowed to do this? And yet this really works for him. My concern for David Price is that if they mess with him on this and the umpires come to him and it gets in his head, am I doing something illegal here, which I don't think it is, and I don't think it should be changed. But if he knows the umpires are looking at him, in theory, that could get in his head a little bit that, the motion that I've come up with here could be a balk, or it could be told, I could be told it's illegal. So hopefully for David Price's sake, this doesn't get in his head. And I read what Rob Bradford had written about him, and he seems to think, look, I'm doing this. There's nothing wrong with this. So he seems emboldened to keep doing this, yet at the same time, if Major League Baseball is going to be watching this very closely, I just wonder if in any way it's going to affect David Price moving forward.
Yeah, and from David Price's perspective, there's a clear difference between what his mechanics are when he's in the windup and when he's working from the stretch position. But Major League Baseball is probably also looking at the numbers against him with stolen bases. In the last 2 years, Timmy's allowed 1 steal in 5 attempts in 2 seasons. So maybe they're concerned about deception, not only for the base runner, but for the umpire. So that's something worth watching going forward. Joe Blanton comes off the free agent board. I was told last week, and I think we talked about in the podcast last week, that Blanton basically had indicated to people, look, if I have to take a pay cut from what I made in 2016, which is $4 million, I'm not going to pitch. Well, the Nationals yesterday gave him an interesting contract, $1 million in salary this year, $3 million in salary that's deferred going forward. And this is a guy, Tim, who, yes, had a rough National League Championship Series against the Cubs, allowing 3 home runs. But during the regular season, he was pretty damn good. This is someone who had 80 innings thrown and 75 appearances. He had an ERA under 3. And an executive with another team, when he heard the final terms for the Nationals, he said, boy, that's a really good signing for Washington.
Yeah, and as we know, Buster, the Nationals are really good at deferring money. They love doing that, so that was no shock that they did that. But, Buster, you're right. That guy pitched in like 75 games last year, and he was really good. And he got his fastball back, his velocity is up, and he was a very useful guy in that Dodger bullpen. Maybe not in October, but the rest of the months he was. And, in today's day, Buster, we know this. This is what teams are doing, is they're building up their bullpens. I saw Don Mattingly yesterday with the Marlins. I told him what a good bullpen he had, and he said, basically, you bet we do. We're looking at an 8-man bullpen here and trying to overpower people with it. And that's, again, what the Nationals do. They keep adding bullpen arms without a true closer. They got to make sure everything is covered before then. But that's a great sign for the Nationals, especially at $1 million for Joe Blanton.
Yeah, what do you think about the Washington bullpen at this point?
Well, first off, I never, ever discount Mike Rizzo. He's one of the sneakier, and this is a compliment, GMs out there who always slides in and gets what he wants, sometimes at the last minute, a la Max Scherzer and others. But I think they're going to open with Blake Trinan and Sean Kelly and see which guy opens the season as the best closing option. I know Trinan has, we'll see if he can do this, but I know that hard sinker is something that nobody wants any part of, and he could be, who knows, a really good closer. But I'm still holding out that Rizzo's got another month to see if he can find a more proven closer to come to Washington. But at the moment, and I'm going to see the Nationals tomorrow, at the moment, I think they're going to open with Trinan or Kelly in some form.
You and I both saw the Yankees on Sunday. I talked to Greg Bird. He told me flat out the same thing he'd been telling the Yankees front office folks, that his surgically repaired shoulder feels great. And then on Tuesday, he hit 2 home runs against the Red Sox. I was talking with an evaluator who has seen the Yankees this spring, and I said, boy, Greg Bird, had a good day. Aaron Judge had a good day the other day. Gleyber Torres, who was the primary chip gotten from the Cubs last year in the Aroldis Chapman trade, he had a good day, and the evaluator said all the Yankees' young players are having great days right now. What do you think?
Well, they've got great young talent in that system. Joe Girardi at the batting cage 3 years ago just looked at me unsolicited and said, wow, do we have some kids in our system? And he said, and I've never been able to say that. And that was 3 years ago, and they've added all sorts of people. I saw Greg Bird just like you did at BP the other day. It's just BP, but he looks healthy to me. Of course, I interviewed Aaron Judge. What a joke that is, by the way, Buster. He might be the biggest baseball player I've ever seen. I saw him and then Giancarlo Stanton like 2 days apart, and I stood right next to both of them. And, of course, I look like a 7-year-old next to them. However, I think Aaron Judge is bigger than Giancarlo Stanton. Now, we'll see if he can make enough contact, and I know batting practice is just batting practice, but he hit some balls over the trees into the wind the other day that I went, whoa, not many people can hit it that far in these kind of conditions. So I would be very encouraged if I were a Yankee fan with the youth in camp, more guys coming, and big free agency coming ahead. There's a real chance the Yankees could be very good in 18 and really, really good in 19.
Yeah, right after we did those interviews with Bird and with Judge, I went in and sat in on an interview that Ali Leogrande did for Baseball Tonight with Matt Holliday, and she asked him about Aaron Judge, and he said, it's the most power I've seen in baseball. He said that, that he and Giancarlo Stanton are in a category by themselves in terms of how much power they have, and I know that they've worked with him this spring on reducing the movement in his front foot, which, he had violent movement that would affect his ability to make contact. And if he clears that up, just one more really good player. You mentioned you were in the Marlins camp, and you talked to D. Gordon. And I was going to say this. I saw D this spring for the first time, Tim, since his suspension last spring. And I wondered how that conversation would go, because I have always loved talking with D, and he's always been incredibly polite. As you know, when you walk up, I'm sure he does the same thing with you. I walk up to him, and he reaches out to shake your hand. He goes, hello, sir. And then you have a great conversation. And, when he was busted last year, I hammered him in my column. I hammered him on television. I walked up to him this spring, kind of wondering how it would be. He was exactly the same. He was a total pro. He just moved on, and we had the same usual conversation. And I respected that because it wasn't like he was blaming me for something that happened. How was your conversation with him?
Well, mine was a little bit different, Buster, because Eduardo Perez, our colleague, put me on the task of going to talk to D. Gordon about basketball, which I love, as you know. But D told Eddie Perez that D is the best basketball player in Major League Baseball. So, naturally, I went to him and said, is this true? He kind of looked at me playfully, Buster, and said, that's absolutely true. No one can guard me in Major League Baseball. So we actually got into his game, how he could really shoot the three, and if they come out and get him to shoot the three, he's going to go by you. And I say, you're going to go by and just drop it in? And he goes, no, I'm going to go by you, and I'm going to embarrass you at the rim because I'm going to dunk it any way that you like. So it was a really fun conversation to the point where he was calling teammates over, including one of his coaches, Juan Pierre, and said, "Tell Tim how great a basketball player I am." And again, he was just half kidding but half not kidding. And I think all this tells us, Buster, is he's in a great mood this spring. He's in a great place this spring. And he is a remarkable athlete. Every time I watch him run, I'm more amazed. And he told me, I hope I get this right, he worked out with some football players in the off season. They were doing all sorts of drills. And one of the football coaches or evaluators was telling the football guys, "See this guy over here? This guy has good speed. He doesn't have D. Gordon speed, but he has good speed." And he was happy to share that with me also. So I found a guy in a good place, and I think that's good for him and certainly good for the Marlins.
But, of course, he can't make the claim to fame that Joe Smith can, right? I mean, we can talk about how good D. Gordon is at basketball, but tell him about Joe Smith.
Well, at the World Series, Joe Smith gave me a blow-by-blow how he beat Steph Curry in a game of pig. I mean, that's just unconscionable to me because I don't think anyone in the world can beat Steph Curry in a real game. But with Joe Smith, I said, "Joe, are you a good player? Can you really shoot it? Or did you just throw in a hook shot from half court?" And he didn't say he was a great shooter, but he said, "I can still shoot a basketball." So I love putting baseball players in other sports, in other positions, because it gives new respect to baseball players and to the players of the other sports. So, yes, Joe Smith beat Steph Curry in pig and lived to tell about it, which I just love.
Last one for you. It's been announced that a minor league affiliate is going to have this summer, Tim, and this is great because I love what the minor league teams do to do promotions, a Trevor Bauer drone bobblehead. And right off the bat, Josh, I know that you are going to go crazy to try to track one of these down to have in the studio as you're taping the show every day.
No question about it. I've contacted the club about getting one pre-ordered for the studio. I haven't been able to pull any strings yet. They must not know who I am.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how that happened. First up, Josh, someone in baseball doesn't know who you are.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
Tim, I'm not really a bobblehead guy, but that one I might work to acquire. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not a bobblehead guy either, although I do have a Tito Francona on his scooter bobblehead given to me by the Indians. And having ridden on that scooter with Tito before, I feel like it's okay for me to have one of those. It's so ridiculous, it's hilarious. And this, too, will be ridiculously hilarious also with Trevor Bauer's drone, of course. I think this all came to pass when Frank Cota, the world's funniest man, looked into the cameras during a press conference in the postseason last year and said, "Yeah, I think we all have our own drone-related accident at some point in our lives." I think that brought just a new level of interest in drones and Trevor Bauer. So this was just a matter of time. I can't wait to see it.
Now, if you were designing the Trevor Bauer drone bobblehead, Josh, I'll start with you. Would you have blood dripping down onto his pants from his right hand?
There's no question about it, Buster. What's the point of having it if you don't have that? Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, Tim, what about you?
I think if Trevor has anything to say about it, he'll say no. But if you're going to do this the right way, you have to say yes, because that was unforgettable to watch that moment.
Historical accuracy. That's what we're all about here on the podcast. Tim, thanks for doing this.
All right, Buster. See you soon.
We'll be back in 1 minute with Yankee shortstop Didi Gregorius. As part of our spring training tour, Baseball Tonight is going camp to camp and having conversations with players rapid fire. And the other day, Ali Leo Grande, one of our production assistants on Baseball Tonight, sat down with Didi Gregorius. Give a listen.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie, old school Gladiator.
Celebrity crush?
I don't really have a celebrity crush. No, not really.
Any when you were growing up?
Celebrity crush? No, not really. I just like watching movies. Yeah.
Walk-up song?
Notorious by Notorious.
Favorite player growing up?
I have a lot. Should I mention all of them?
If you want, go ahead.
I had Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey, Derek Jeter, Jimmy Rawlings, Barry Larkin, just to see how the guys were playing the game on and off the field and how they do.
Nice. If you weren't a baseball player, you'd be?
Doctor, probably, because I was studying going in that direction.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Number of tattoos, favorite tattoo?
Number of tattoos. I go with 18, and all of them are my favorite because everyone has a meeting, and I draw almost I think there are only 2 that I haven't drawn, but I draw everything else.
18?
Yep.
How old were you when you got your first one?
My first one, I was 19.
Okay. Wow.
I made a deal with my mom. If I cut my hair, I'm allowed to get my first tattoo.
You said you draw them?
Yeah.
Are you an artist?
Yeah, kind of. My hidden talents.
Very cool. Favorite emoji?
The one with the tongue out.
Nice. Cool. All right. Who would you rank as the top player at your position, and why?
Who would I rank? It's a tough question, actually. Who would I rank? I mean, all-around player or just...
Yeah, all-around player.
All-around player.
At shortstop.
At shortstop. I'll still take Simmons. Yeah.
Why?
I mean, he's my buddy. Play with him since he was growing up, and I mean, I saw him play since we were like 6 years old, and he hasn't changed at all. So it's like a vacuum at shortstop. So I'll go with him.
Well, you got me going to my next question, which is, so what are your thoughts on the growing list of players from the Aruba, Curacao area? You got Scope, Profar, Andrelton Simmons, Bogarts, yourself.
I mean, it's just awesome for me because, we're growing up, play with each other and then play against each other. And, we all want the best of each other, so we talked about when we go home, we practice everything. Everybody wants to be successful, so why not push each other so everybody can make it? So in our generation, let's say, in our time when we were young, almost everybody is in the major league right now. So, I mean, it's just awesome that, we help out and try to help each other. It's the little things that help. So, I mean, it's good, and we put our island on the map. So I think it's really great.
So when you guys were growing up, who was the best player?
Defensively and offensively, I still go with Simmons. I mean, it's funny because what you see doing right now, I already saw that when he's like 6'6" and older. So, I mean, even the guy they're playing against, they're like, as soon as they hit a ground ball short, they knew it was going to be out anyway. So, they wouldn't even run kind of. So, but, I mean, he hasn't changed at all.
What was it growing up that pushed you towards a baseball life instead of being a doctor?
Well, for me, it was my family thing because it's like a family thing for us. My dad played professional baseball in the Netherlands. My mom played professional softball in the Netherlands. My brother played professional baseball. And so, they gave me the options, either want to do any other sports. And, I stuck with baseball. And, they all have their support and push me. And that's why I'm here.
Who taught you more about the game, your mom or your dad?
Who taught me more? I'd say both of them, actually. Both of them. My dad was a coach, and my mom always there when she was there every day at the field whenever we were playing. So, I mean, she's there for support. My dad coached me. Even my brother, when I go home, he's the one that throws and tosses all that stuff to me. So, I mean, it's everybody.
I just read that tell me if this is true, you go by Didi, your brother goes by Didi, your dad goes by Didi. How do you, does your mom call you all Didi?
No,
How does it work?
Yeah, my mom just calls us at our first name. Yeah.
So last year, you hit a career-high 20 home runs. You hit a home run on the first at-bat this spring.
This spring.
What do you credit for that surge in power?
I mean, I'm just trying to stay consistent, That's all I'm trying to do. I mean, I've got really great hitting coaches, teaching me the way to play the game and how to make better swings on everything we do. So, I mean, that's what helps you. And you got to take that to the game. And I'm not going to say I'm going to hit 20 homers and 30 homers or 40 homers, but I mean, how many homers as I hit, that's it, So I'm not going to transition myself to be a power hitter because I prefer to hit line drives all over the field. And if they go out, they go out. But I'm just trying to put a good swing and try to stay consistent to those 162 games.
Buggy Dent recently said that he thinks you've done a fabulous job playing in New York, especially following Derek Jeter at shortstop. How do you feel about your first 2 years in New York?
I mean, I always say this to myself, I could always be better. Because I'm never satisfied the way I play. I always want to make that improvement, make that adjustment, try to get better, be a better player, better teammate. But so far, I think I'm doing a good job, and I'm just trying to get better.
Last one. What are you most excited about for the 2017 Yankees?
I mean, just see all the young talents that we got here. That's what I'm most excited about. And then everybody played for that championship at the end, so I think that's what everybody shoots for. And hopefully everybody's ready to do that.
It's time for some Inside Heat on Baseball Tonight.
Andy McCullough covers the Los Angeles Dodgers for the Los Angeles Times. You can follow his work on Twitter at McCullough Times. And Andy, I've never asked you this before. I think that in following you on Twitter, there's more shrapnel flying back and forth between you and other writers, I think, than any journalist in America. Now, let's face it, that is a high bar with all the stuff that goes on, but it always feels like there's shots going back and forth between you and your brethren.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a really well-liked guy. I try to treat people with respect and nice, cordial conversations with people on the internet. So, yeah, I appreciate you noticing that and bringing it up. It means a lot, and my mom is definitely not going to be upset when she hears this.
Yeah, it's sort of like watching you on Twitter is like the Twitter version of the Second Amendment, right? I mean, you're just firing off all over the place. It seems like every day you got something going.
There's a young man in Fort Myers, Florida, named Evan Drellick right now who's going to be very upset to hear himself not mentioned in this conversation. So we'll see.
Well, he is now. You took care of that. Hey, so anyway, Dodgers camp, and look, they've got a lot of things that they worked on during the course of the winter. But let's face it, the big question about the Dodgers going into the season is, will Clayton Kershaw hold up? And I've been reading everything you've been writing, that Clayton insists that he's absolutely fine. And one of the interesting things about him is, incredibly hard worker. He's this huge guy who has really intense workouts. And after what he experienced last year and after he broke down, have you seen any let-up in some of the work that he's doing? Because that's a question I've been asked by other players about Clayton. Because, as you know, a lot of times when players get older, they kind of scale back on the workouts. They try to conserve themselves for the course of the season. And I just don't see Clayton ever being someone who would be comfortable doing that. What's your sense of, A, how he's feeling, and B, how he's structured his workouts and coming back from the back problem last year?
Yeah, I don't think if he was listening to this, he would be happy if I described him as scaling back his workouts, because that's definitely something that's, it's very important to him. I think that he puts in as much effort as possible, but I do think in conversations, with the training staff and with, some of their physical therapy folks, he has, I guess, smartened up the workouts, for lack of a better term. They're doing things that are going to be less taxing on his back. I think his running is probably, at least, because he changed a lot of this when he came back from the disabled list last summer. And so, his running became a little less conspicuous. He was the guy who, when you came into the press box, at 2 p.m. for a 7 o'clock game, he's the guy running in the outfield. And he still does a ton of cardio, but I think they've cut back on that. He was doing some things that were more involving like lateral movement, almost like a linebacker slide drill, just kind of going back and forth, which has kind of the same, just the idea that it would essentially be less taxing on him. Now, Kershaw is very private about his health. He's very private about his, his time and his schedule. And so, he hasn't spoken a ton about what things have changed. But the general idea in talking to him and to other organizations, his coaches, members of the training staff, that sort of stuff, the idea is just to keep him doing stuff so he feels like he's getting in the work necessary, but not risk his back for further injury.
What's your sense from him about how he's doing, and what's your sense from the organization about how they feel about where he's at?
He says he feels good, and the organization says he feels good. It's the sort of thing you're not going to know until you know. This Kershaw is very, very guarded about the amount of information he lets out in the public. So if he's dealing with something and he doesn't want people to know about it, generally people aren't going to know about it. But there's no evidence right now that really anything's going on. I mean, he made his first start the other day. He looked fine. He threw, 12 pitches or whatever and buzzed through an inning. He threw his bullpen, coming out of it the other day. He's scheduled to throw again on Thursday. So, he's on a standard progression, but it's just the sort of thing that, you always have to be mindful of it. And I think that's more an issue for the team than it is for Kershaw. His job is to take the mound every fifth day, to be smart about his back. I don't think his job necessarily is to worry, thinking like, wow, at any moment this could get worse. I think it's, it's the team's idea more to plan, okay, in the event that we have to deal with something, we like what we went through last year, we need to have the depth and the resources available to, fix that sort of problem. And I think they've done that with the way they assembled this roster. But, yeah, I mean, it's something that's going to be on the mind of the team for the rest of, the year, probably next year. That's kind of the reality of being a pitcher in the big leagues.
Yeah, and as he gets older, that question will probably hover over him. And to your point about his privacy, I mean, last year he was only having the greatest season ever for any starting pitcher ever, and all of a sudden he wasn't pitching for a couple months, right? And it didn't seem like there was any run-up or any lead-up. And go ahead.
Exactly, just to hear people who were close to him tell it, he was in apparently tremendous discomfort during a decent amount of that stretch. He was pitching through serious pain, to get there. And when he came back, he obviously, came back a little quicker, I think, than most players would have been. And as Andrew Friedman said, most players would have just shut it down based on the injury he had. And Kershaw not only came back, but had some really remarkable moments in the postseason. I know, obviously it didn't end the way they wanted. He did not pitch particularly well in Game 6 against the Cubs, but, that performance in Game 2 against the Cubs, Game 4 against the Nats, and, of course, Game 5 against the Nats, I think, were really remarkable, especially considering, how he physically may have been compromised.
So what's your guess at this point how the rest of that rotation will shake out? Because all they have is about 150 different candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go right now with the path of least resistance and most depth. So I'll say Hill is the number 2 guy. Maeda is the number 3 guy. That's not really in doubt. But then I would probably just say it's going to be Scott Kazmir and Brandon McCarthy until there's further evidence of, them doing anything else. But as of right now, if you want to, play this out, the Dodgers, like most teams, want to preserve depth. So, they're not just going to jettison Kazmir or McCarthy if those guys are healthy and pitching well this spring. So that means guys like Ross Stripling, Brock Stewart, even Alex Wood may have to go to the minors. Wood could obviously help the bullpen. And then, with Hyun-Jin Ryu, there's just no evidence yet that he's ready to face big league competition. He's still, he's maybe going to throw another session of live batting practice, the third, later this week. He might just throw a bullpen instead. They're being really cautious with Ryu. And then with Julio Urias, they need to preserve his innings. And so I think, and if Kazmir and McCarthy are healthy and pitching fine this spring, they're going to get the spots because it just doesn't make sense. If Urias is on an innings limit, it doesn't make sense to bring him up in April, shut him down in the middle of the summer for the third year in a row, and then try and have him be at his best in September and October. They want to give him a continuous season. And so I think just, thinking about all those paths and also the paths that cause depth, it'll be McCarthy and Kazmir.
And following up on McCarthy, as you know, around baseball, there is some question with other teams whether or not McCarthy was dealing with some form of the yips or, the thing or however you want to refer to it.
Yeah.
He lost his strike zone. What's your sense of sort of, what does he believe and how they've dealt with whatever he was dealing with when he couldn't find the strike zone?
Yeah, he has talked. I mean, he doesn't, like most players, he doesn't like talking about having the thing, but he's been, pretty open in saying that it was something that he's dealt with. And, he doesn't really want to get too deep into kind of the methods that he did. He said he talked to a bunch of different people about, it said it was mainly like an alignment with his hips that he needed to readjust, which seems like a really small thing, but I can understand if you're coming back from Tommy John surgery, and your body just doesn't feel right, how it could suddenly be, devolve into a mental sort of thing. But he basically said he made some adjustments with his hips. He talked a lot about it with some other people and was able to get through it. And he pitched well in his final start of the year last year. I don't think necessarily if you have one start, it's like immediately, problem solved. But he's been fine this spring. The bullpens have looked good. This is a guy who's had like really good stuff, and his stuff can look really, really nasty. At different times. He threw live BP the other day. It was, to one untrained observer's eye, it looked fine. He was around the plate and low in the zone, and he looked okay. He's going to get in the game later this week. So, yeah, I mean that's another thing where like I don't know. I don't think it's because obviously the guy in baseball probably has the most out version right now is John Lester. He's obviously learned to compensate around that. I don't think this is what McCarthy went through. That was more of like a 4 or 5 start thing, a month long, maybe 2 month long issue, whereas Lester has dealt with this for years and years. So, the hope from the Dodgers that he's past it, and there's no evidence this spring that, it's back. It's not like he's spraying the ball around in bullpen sessions or drilling guys in a live BP.
I was in Astros camp the other day, and it's clear that they'll be looking for starting pitching as the spring goes along, maybe into the start of the regular season. And you look at the Dodgers, a team being perhaps, in position at the end of spring training to have some pitching to talk to other teams about. I know that early in the offseason, They had talked with other teams and made it known that Scott Kazmir was available. As they sit here now, who do you think would be the most likely guy that maybe would represent surplus that they might trade at some point?
Well, it's both Kazmir and McCarthy in that regard. They're obviously both making decent chunks of money. Kazmir's owed, another $32 million. I think McCarthy's got another 24 these next 2 seasons. So, either one, I guess, could theoretically be expendable. But just given what the Dodgers went through last year, where they had to use so many different starting pitchers, I think it was 15, I don't know that they're going to be necessarily trying to, reduce the surplus. I think they want to maintain it. But, obviously, look, if they get a legitimate offer that's value for value on one of those guys, I think they're going to listen. As you said, both of them, they talked about with other teams and made aware that they could be available. But it's just, if they're not going to be like selling for 75 cents on the dollar on those guys, whatever the theoretical dollar value is, they want to get full value. And because, Kazmir was a pretty good pitcher not a long time ago. McCarthy was a pretty good pitcher not a long time ago. And I know, a lot of things have happened with both of them, but, they're veteran guys who have track records of success. And so if you're the Dodgers, I don't think you want to suddenly reduce that surplus unless it's a real compelling offer in exchange.
Last one for you. One of the more amazing things about the Dodgers camp this spring, so few stories about Yasiel Puig. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, what do you want to know? We'll find out in a few weeks if he hits righty. That's I feel like Puig's always going to be a huge player of interest, for people on the outside of the organization, and I think he's still capable of doing really entertaining things on the field, and he still has potentially a pretty high ceiling. But look, I mean, he's been not a great baseball player these past couple seasons, especially last year. Most of his offensive production occurred against left-handed pitchers, and he needs to prove that he can hit righties again, and he needs to prove he can hit fastballs again. And these are all things he struggled with last year, and there's really no way to prove it down here in spring training. So yeah, it looks like he's going to be the starting right fielder. There's a scenario where they could theoretically option Andrew Toles to the minors and give Puig just an extended run at right and see if he can be the everyday guy. And then if he's not capable, maybe they bring up Toles. And that way Scott Van Slyke could, be Adrian Gonzalez's backup against left-handed pitchers. The Dodgers make tons of roster moves all the time, so there's lots of different machinations going on. But look, I mean, Puig kind of needs to prove that he's a starting right fielder. If you look at his production these past couple of years, it's below what you would like from for a frontline player for a championship caliber club. You would need a little bit more production there. But at the same time, the Dodgers have never been less reliant on Yasiel Puig than they are going into this season. He's not the focal point of their offense. That's going to be Corey Seager, Justin Turner, Logan Forsythe, Jock Peterson, Yasmani Grandal. All those guys are more valuable hitters than Puig. So whatever they get, if he's batting 7th or 8th, if he's capable of playing every day, that'll probably be a bonus. But yeah, you're right. It's quiet here. Puig's not really causing any trouble, fits in well with his teammates. I think he took to heart a lot of the stuff that, the team tried to reinforce with him last year. But I've been told that stories like that have been written before in the past about him. So I guess we'll just see what happens. It's one of those things where we're not going to know until, we actually see him play in real games.
Andy, thanks for doing this. And you can go back to turning Twitter into MMA.
I'll try my best.
Bleacher Tweets.
First Bleacher tweet today, Buster, comes from B. Paul at BA Paul 73, and he says Jason Heyward has a retooled swing this year, but is currently 0 for 8 with 2 Ks so far this spring. Is there any cause for concern?
Yes, spring training results typically don't mean anything for most players. In the case of Jason Heyward, absolutely, they mean something. It's not necessarily his statistics, but I think he probably needs some positive results after doing that work to help his confidence, because his confidence just seemed gone last year. And we talked earlier in the offseason about how he probably will be under the most pressure of any player in baseball at the outset of the season, a need to get off to a good start.
Yeah, I was expecting you to say spring training results don't mean anything. Come on, man. But I think you're right. No. For his mental stability, he needs to see the ball hit the bat and land. Next one from Katie at Buttercup8181. Buster, who's going to be the Red Sox #1 pitcher in the rotation, and will it crush egos?
I know, first off, when you're around David Price and you're around Chris Sale and you're around Rick Porcello, all those guys are great teammates. And I think that no matter which way John Farrell were to go in terms of picking the number one starter, the other two guys wouldn't care. Yeah. That's not really their makeup. But I think it's an easy choice, Josh. I don't know about you. Yeah. Rick Porcello won the American League Cy Young Award. He was with the Red Sox last year. To me, he gets the ball on opening day, and then you slide everybody else in.
Yeah. My gut tells me that Sale's going to be the best pitcher in the rotation.
But in terms of getting the ball opening day, being anointed number one.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. And I wouldn't have a problem with that. And the second part of her question, will it crush egos? It better not. Next one from Victor Romero, at Victor Romero 55. Buster, I heard you say last week that the Rockies will be much improved, but besides Gray, do they have any quality starting pitchers?
Yeah, and Victor, you properly identified the soft underbelly of this team. It's pitching depth. They do have some other quality starters. Tyler Chatwood's pretty good. Tyler Anderson, 3.54 ERA and 114 in third innings last year. Chad Bettis, who's coming back from a cancer diagnosis, but he's fine now going into the year. Over the course of a season, the Rockies' pitching tends to evaporate because they just don't have a lot of depth, and Coors Field just beats on pitchers. And so we'll see if they're able to overcome that. I do know this. In talking with scouts, executives out in Arizona, they say that there's a lot of positivity about the Rockies this spring.
And finally, Buster, this one from Matt Fisher, at Fisher Wrights MLB. And he says, once Evan Longoria and David Wright retire, and he puts in parentheses, Longo's not even a sure thing, will we see any more one-team career players?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think you could see some. I think Madison Bumgarner will be one. I think Buster Posey will be one. I think Clayton Kershaw has a chance to be one. That's going to happen, especially with big market teams.
Keep the questions coming. Use the hashtag Bleacher Tweets.
One last thing.
So we got bad news about one of baseball's best citizens, David Wright. And last week we were in Mets camp, and I sat down with David to go rapid fire. As usual, he was great. Give it a listen.
What's your favorite movie?
Step Brothers.
Celebrity crush?
My wife.
Walk-up song?
Undecided this year, but open for suggestions.
Favorite player growing up?
Karl Ravech Jr.
If you weren't a baseball player, you would be?
An engineer.
Number of tattoos, favorite tattoo?
0 and 0.
Why?
I've never been a tattoo guy, and I think my mom would probably still kill me if I got a tattoo.
Favorite emoji?
Not a social media guy either.
This leads into my next one. What are your personal rules for social media?
Don't start, and then you won't have any problems. Just laugh at other people that make mistakes on social media.
Which leads into my next one. Okay. What's it like to watch Noah on social media?
Oh, God. I guess entertaining is the word that pops in mind. It's just unfiltered sometimes. It's certainly not, Curtis Granderson on social media. It's a little more unfiltered than that, but, it certainly works for his personality.
What's it like to face Clayton Kershaw?
I can't think of probably a tougher at-bat and against a bigger competitor. You know that he's got a number of different pitches to get you out with, and that, once you feel like you're on a certain pitch, he just has another one to throw at you. So I'd say, certainly one of, if not the best in the game.
What have you seen in Yoenis Cespedes this spring?
I would just say, I think his comfort level is through the roof now that he knows he's going to be here for the long term. So I think that, it seems like there's a little bit of a weight off his shoulders where now he can just completely focus on baseball, and that's scary to think.
What was your first draw to baseball?
I would just say I just loved everything about the game. I loved waking up on Saturdays and spending the whole day at the Little League Park. I loved the concession stand food. I loved, just the team camaraderie. And just some of my best friends probably to this day are guys that I grew up playing baseball with. So, I owe a lot to this game, and that started, when I was about as young as I can remember.
Specifically, what did you get out of Little League?
I'm just the concept of team first. I remember my dad never, I want to say cared, but obviously he cared if I did well, but would never, talk to me about or get on me if I struggled. But he'd always get on me if I struggled and then didn't root on the next batter or root on a teammate. And I think that team philosophy has really stuck with me.
If you were speaking to a group of 9, 10-year-old kids, how would you make the case to them to play baseball?
Have fun. There's too many, and I've been around it. There's too many, with other guys that I've played with, parents, growing up that treat this like it's a job for these kids. And I mean, have fun with it. It's a game, and it's supposed to be fun, and let the kids laugh, let the kids enjoy it, and that's how you get better, is you fail, and you figure out how to not fail the next time. And this is a game of failure, so you can't take it too seriously.
Who would you rank at the top player at your position, and why?
I mean, it's probably between Manny Machado and Nolan Arenado. I mean, and it's not just because, for the longest time it was, you put one of the not so great defensive guys at third base and just hope they hit. Now it's, these guys play Gold Glove caliber defense. They can run the bases, they steal bases. You got a lot of guys that could easily switch over there and play shortstop and do very well at it. So, I certainly think that the position has transformed into more of an athletic position where it's, more complete players rather than just, a guy that can hit and just try to hide him over there.
I did a ranking of third basemen during the offseason, and wow.
Yeah.
Chris Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're like...
I consider Chris Bryant more of a utility guy. I mean,
yeah, because he's moving around.
It's amazing. Like,
yeah.
You can put him in the outfield. You can put him, it's so... that's a compliment to him that I don't even consider him. You can make the case for him at a number of different positions, which is amazing.
How do you feel? What do you expect for yourself this year?
I think that's a great question. I think I'm learning every day, kind of what it takes to get ready to play. You couple coming off of neck surgery with, a chronic back issue, and you just think that you're learning every day. I mean, I'm still at the point where I'm trying to figure out what's the best kind of routine to get into where I'm feeling pretty solid on a daily basis, and so far so good.
How do you learn that? I'm just curious.
I just, one day you get up and, because the biggest thing is trying to get better, for spring training, get better at baseball. So, if I'm tiring myself out preparing for a day of spring training, that doesn't do me any good. So it's just a slow process of trying to figure out, okay, this works, this doesn't work, let's cross this off the list, let's add this, and still, go out there and, focus on baseball.
Describe what it's like playing in New York.
I mean, I think it's the best. Granted, I don't know anything else, but I've talked to plenty of people that when you get to New York, and whether you like it or not, all eyes are on you. I feel like you're on the biggest sports stage, in particular baseball, that the game has to offer. And I've experienced both ends of the spectrum here. Winning, there's nothing that even comes close to it. And the flip side of that is when things aren't going well, you're under a microscope, and you better be willing to take some punches if you're willing to accept all the good things that come along with winning here. And fortunately, we're in a position lately where we've done a nice job of putting together a couple good seasons, and I think the goal right now is to be the first Mets team in history to go back-to-back-to-back playoff bursts. I think that's everybody's goal. We want to be the first, and I think that motivates us.
Last one for you. When a rising young Stark comes to you, or you see someone on the team along those lines playing New York, what's the advice you give them?
I don't think there's any advice that needs to be given. I think more importantly, it's the same game once you get between the lines. And I think the pressure is kind of what you interpret it to be. So I think, if you can somehow clear your head and just think about just playing the game. The mound is still the same distance. The bases are still the same distance. And I would say the biggest piece of advice is structure your day. because there's a lot of people pulling you in different directions, wanting you to do this, wanting you to do that. But the reason that they're pulling you is because of what you do on the baseball field. Don't ever forget that being able to manage your day and time management, I think, is a crucial thing to have when you're playing baseball in New York.
Thanks, man.
No problem.
Well, that's it for today. My thanks to David Wright, to Didi Gregorius, to Andy McCullough, to Tim Kurkjian, and to Josh Macri, who produced this podcast every single day. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Baseball Tonight podcast. If you're playing fantasy baseball, don't forget to listen to the Fantasy Focus podcast. Check out all podcasts at ESPN.com/PodCenter. Baseball Tonight, the podcast.